meeting is being recorded. Just verifying that it is actually being recorded, which it is now. So with that, this meeting is being recorded. You're welcome to East Hempfield Township Board of Supervisors meeting. It is April 15th at 7 o'clock. These past few weeks, we've experienced unprecedented challenges as we deal with a global pandemic from China that's challenging both our immediate health and our long-term financial well-being. We have seen predictable poor behavior from many, offset by good actions of people making the most of a bad situation by trying to help and serve others for the good of the community and loved ones. This good behavior at the local level is exemplified by our emergency service providers, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMS workers, not to mention our healthcare professionals who all serve on the front lines of the pandemic. I ask you to keep them in your prayers for protection, strengthening, and encouragement as they work in the most challenging circumstances they've ever faced. Unlike state government, local government is entirely essential and does not close and does not stop providing critical service. As long as the pandemic goes on, local government will be serving the community, meeting critical emergency management services needs, while also maintaining roads, trash, water, and sewer services. Local government is adapting, and this meeting is no exception to a new way of doing business in a social distancing environment. With the governor's orders, large assemblies have been outlawed during this emergency statewide to include public meetings. However, second-class township code requires us to meet, and the Sunshine Act requires those meetings to be in public. To meet all three of these somewhat conflicting rules, we are conducting our second ever virtual public meeting with the best technology available short notice. We feel we are doing our best to comply with the governor's orders while still complying with existing law but never anticipated a pandemic. Tonight's meeting has been advertised to be held online with Zoom, with login, and also the call-in information posted on our website. If you're calling into the meeting, I'd like to encourage you to remain on the call, but to also go to the township website by Googling East Hempfield Township and to log on to our Zoom meeting following instructions on our home webpage. Tonight's video and audio is being recorded. Also, messages sent via Zoom's chat section will be read in the meeting and logged, saved, and archived with the video. Both will be made available on our website after the meeting. For tonight's meeting, Robert's rules will still apply, and the meeting will be run by the chairman who will serve as the host on the Zoom site, assisted by the township manager. Everyone other than the manager and the chairman will have their microphones muted in order for audio to be heard clearly. Many people speaking at the same time combined with background noise make meetings like this impossible to hear. During the meeting, only one person may speak at a time, and they must be recognized by the chairman. For supervisors and staff, you will need to unmute your microphone to speak when acknowledged. You will need to remute your microphone when done speaking or if instructed by the chairman. The steps to speak for staff and supervisors are simple. 1, unmute your microphone. 2, request recognition by the chairman. 3, at the receiving recognition, speak. And 4, when done speaking, mute your microphone. Residents and business owners' comments received ahead of the meeting will be read during public comment or before an applicable action is taken on an agenda item. The resident can also participate in the meeting using the Zoom chat function. Messages received from residents during the meeting from chat will be read aloud, just like asking a question. No verbal questions or statements will be accepted during the meeting from residents or businesses, only chat messages. All messages must include the name and the street address as required for public comment in order to be read aloud. Again, as a resident, to participate in the meeting, if you're calling in, you must go to Google the East Hempfield Township website and log into our Zoom meeting that's listed on our homepage. You may select to remain on your phone while now also having video access to the meeting. The chat button is on your bottom right of your Zoom screen. Simply select it and type in your comments or questions. To repeat, no verbal questions or statements will be accepted during the meeting from residents and businesses, only chat messages. Any violations of the above mentioned rules will be deemed to be acting out of order, and your microphone will be muted without warning. Continued violations will result in you being electronically removed from the meeting. All voting tonight will be done by roll call vote to ensure all votes are properly accounted for. Roll call will be conducted by a township manager. There will be no action taken on any non-agenda items of a non-emergency, non-urgent nature that arise from the meeting. All such actions will be referred to staff and will be handled at a later meeting. It is East Hempfield's intention to continue meeting during the pandemic as required by law when there are agenda items requiring action, which is common to almost all meetings. We will utilize this hybrid online meeting format for the time being until such time that the governor lifts the prohibition for public gatherings. We are permitted to meet as we are accustomed to. We ask for your patience and understanding as we strive to continue serving the residents and businesses of the township while fully complying with social distancing requirements prescribed by the governor. So now we will move on to our first agenda item. Please join me for a moment of silence. Next item would normally be our Pledge of Allegiance. Instead, I'd just like to acknowledge and encourage everybody to raise their American flag in front of their house each day while the pandemic is going on until we return back to normal. And so now on to our next items of the agenda. The first item of the agenda is our consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to approve routine items that usually require very little debate or discussion. And with that, I'll open up to the supervisors if there's any comments on the consent agenda. Mr. Leafier, you waved to me, so it looks like you're trying to talk. We cannot hear you, Mr. Lefevre, at all. There's no sound coming from you. Ms. Schweitzer.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to make a correction to the minutes, which is maybe what Mr. Lefevre is trying to do, hopefully.
Okay.
The last page of the minutes, when it refers to public comment, Mr. Mellinger's comment was averted, was not included in the minutes, and I wanted to add those. So be underneath Ken Ralph's comments on the last page, I would like to add, Robert Mellinger via Zoom chat noted that he desires the speed tables to remain as installed. And these are the speed tables on Farmingdale Road.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schweitzer. And I'll leave you, you can stay unmuted, please. So. And we have a question about McCormick Taylor. Mr. Lefevre, could you possibly try calling in?
Yeah, Scott's the chairman. He's the only one that can do it. I'll ask him. Wave, I'll tell him.
What's the problem now?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bennett would like to speak. He's unable to get unmuted.
Let me find out what's causing that, if you guys don't mind here for a second, because I shouldn't have to have people wave in order for them to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Bennett.
Okay, now I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Two quick comments. One concerning 701 Stony Battery Road and the possibility that the applicant will be looking to increase the number of truck travel in that development. Will that come back to planning before it comes back to us?
You need to unmute John Beck.
Okay, where's Mr. Beck here? I have no idea. If he's called in by telephone, he's not identified right now.
And then the other question I have has to do with the small cell and 5G installation within the township. I assume that the township will proceed based on the recommendations made by Mr. Cohen.
To your first point, Mr. Bennett, I had a email communication with the attorney for Catalyst. They will be submitting a modified conditional use application for 701 to address the 50 plus large truck trips per day that they're anticipating for that use. They're also going to be submitting a conditional use application for the neighboring property at 791 Stony Battery Road. With conditional use applications, those do not go to the Planning Commission. They go straight to the board, just like a zoning hearing board application. To your point or question about 5G, we did get an email from a resident concerned about providers trying to slip or sneak or push the township to approve the small cells throughout the township. We did reach out to Mike Roberts, an attorney from the Cohen Law Group, and he advised the board against enacting any type of moratorium as it is in direct conflict with the FCC rulings. With regards to our ordinance, I have submitted that to the Lancaster County Planning Commission for review and recommendation, and that will be scheduled for the May 11th County Planning Commission meeting for their recommendations.
Okay, I understand what you're saying about the 5G, and the recommendation that came from the attorney was that we didn't want to do anything specific to 5G itself, identifying that or putting in any kind of a moratorium with that, but we could take our time issuing new permits.
That we are still subject to the approval requirements under the FCC ruling.
Well, okay. I guess I would just, hopefully all the supervisors read the recommendation from the attorney. My own feeling is that we should go with what he recommends.
And I just like to point out, we have not had any issues with any of the providers trying to push the township for approvals on any of their sites. In fact, we haven't received any new applications up to this point. And the communications we heard from
Well, I guess I would refer to the second paragraph in the recommendation. The safest route for the township is simply to communicate with wireless providers when applications are submitted to inform such providers that shot clocks will need to be told and that such applications are low priority to the extent their review conflicts with public safety activities.
I see what you're saying, Mr. Bennett, and yes, we will take those steps to communicate with the providers.
Okay, sounds good. That's the important part of the issue for me.
That second paragraph actually is in line with the Senate Bill 841 that is going through the legislature right now. So there's no issues for the township acting in that way.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, I think we've worked out a couple of glitches. Mr. Fever, can you communicate with us now?
Yes, I hope so. I've gone to my PC and it must be something with my laptop. It's the same problem I had 2 weeks ago. My question to Mrs. Schweitzer is, can you tell us what McCormick Taylor has done to earn the invoice amount in the payables for the Holland Street Bridge?
There's a lot of work being done behind the scenes. The Holland Street Bridge, they are continuing to work with PP&L and they're just doing groundwork. They typically bill back 1 month, so we're probably looking at February's work. Specifically, I'd have to look back and see.
Well, I saw the date of the invoice was more or less before the closing started, so I understood that part. It's just that I thought that that project was stalled with a Amtrak issue.
They actually had submitted the 90% plans to Amtrak, and probably a lot of that invoice was because of that. but I can go back and verify that.
Okay, well, I just thought I wanted to question that, so thank you.
Okay. Looks like I worked out the bug too, so now anybody that is here can actually unmute themselves. I got rid of the lock that was being done by the host. So we got that little bug resolved too. Is there any more comments or questions about the consent agenda? We have the only thing so far is the amendment about Mr. Mellinger's comments that have been added to the meeting minutes. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda with the meeting minutes amended as noted.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to,
Okay, motion of Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Wigglesworth. Mrs. Schweitzer, will you please poll the board?
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye. So the ayes have it, 5-0. With that, we'll now move on to our action items. And the first action item we have is development services. It's Oyster Point Clean Fill Stormwater Management Plan, and I will turn that over to Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before the board tonight are a few action items. The first is the modification requests for their stormwater plan. Second one is approval of the O&M agreement. And third is financial security. Fourth is the stormwater management plan fee. And the last one is the stormwater management plan maintenance fee. This project is, it was submitted to the township by Wexcon, who is a contractor for Lancaster City Water Authority. They are looking to improve the site off of Stony Battery Road, which is just northwest of Todd Lane. It encompasses both East Hempfield and West Hempfield Township. West Hempfield Township has deferred approval to East Hempfield Township for the stormwater plan. And they are looking to establish that site simply to put fill from their project with the large water main extension that's going through Old Tree Drive and Columbia Avenue from their site, from their well off of Centerville Road and in between Centerville and Stony Battery. The modifications have been before the Planning Commission, and they recommended approval of the, waivers. They recommended approval of the waivers, and staff supports that and is recommending the board grant those waivers. In addition, Scott Hain and Susan Pfeiffer, the township solicitor, both reviewed the O&M agreement. They're recommending approval of the O&M agreement, so staff is respectfully requesting the board approve the O&M agreement and then establish the financial security in the amount of $81,388.51. Establish the stormwater management fee in the amount of $818.58, and the stormwater management inspection fee in the amount of $818.58.
Okay, so do we have any discussion of the board right now about this approval? This is a pretty routine approval. It's for E&S measures to support the city of Lancaster's project. Okay, seeing none. I am going to need help with you, Mr. Beck, on the dollar amounts again. So I'd like to do, if you can craft for me a quick motion on the O&M agreement and financial security agreement after we adopt the waivers. Okay?
Yep, not a problem.
So the first one, I will introduce a motion to approve waiver request number 1 and number 2 for the Oyster Point Stormwater Management Plan as identified in the David Miller letter as discussed.
So moved.
Okay, motion of Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I have a second?
Aye.
Okay, second from Mr. LaFever. Mrs. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver? Do we lose Mr. Weaver?
I am not seeing him all of a sudden.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it with 4, and we had Mr. Weaver drop off, and I'm sure he will join it. It looks like he just came on board. And it looks like he's trying, so we'll just give a pause here. And it looks like he is in. Mr. Weaver, what say you?
I had an overheated computer.
Okay. We were just, we had a motion and a second to adopt the Oyster Point Stormwater Management waiver request number 1 and number 2 from our David Miller letter. Mrs. Schweitzer just pulled the board. There's 4 ayes. What say you?
I did look over the plans and I am also an aye.
Okay, so the ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Now, Mr. Beck, if you can help me out with the O&M agreement and the financial security agreements, as I do not have the dollars in front of me right now. So if you can read those off in a motion format, you'll take action on those motions.
Do you wish to take the motion for the O&M agreement separately from the fees?
Yes, please.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the Oyster Point Clean Fill Site Stormwater Management Operations and Maintenance Agreement, subject to township solicitors and township engineers' comments.
Okay, so we have that motion. Do I have a motion for that reading of that motion?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. LaFever. Ms. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye. So ayes have it 5-0. Now, if you could do the financial securities, Mr. Beck, please.
Mr. Russell, would you want me to do one motion for all 3?
Yes, please.
Okay. We're looking for a motion to establish the Oyster Point Clean Fill Stormwater Management Plan's financial security in the amount of $81,388.51, to establish the Stormwater Management Plan inspection fee in the amount of $818.58, and to establish the Stormwater Management Plan maintenance fee in the amount of $818.58.
Okay, the motion's been read. Do I have a motion of support?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. LaFever. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Bennett. Ms. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye. So the ayes have it 5-0. Okay, our next agenda item, we have the Swar Run Restoration, Section 510 Program, Chesapeake Bay Environmental Restoration Protection Program funding, a letter of intent application submission. I guess, Mr. Beck, do you want to start off explaining this for everybody and for the audience?
Due to the approvals through the Army Corps, the township actually has to be the applicant for the permit. The developer is asking the township to submit a letter of intent that is a precursor for the application or will be coupled with the application. The township staff is fully supportive of the restoration project. It is in keeping with what we've done with the Brew Breaker Run for the Lime Spring Square project. And basically gives an outline for the development. The restorations proposed for the east side of Swore Run, which extends 1,823 linear feet. It aligns with the NPDS permit limits of land. The project will remove legacy sediment, restoring the surrounding wetland and stream complex, and it is going to provide a significant functional uplift, including habitat restoration, increased flood storage, reduced sediment loading, and improved bioecochemical processing of pollutants, and numerous other benefits. So staff is respectfully requesting that the board authorize either the chairman or the vice chairman to sign the letter of intent.
Okay, any discussion of the board? As we talked about, we've gone down the road of doing these restoration projects. They help us out with our MS4 program, saving the township a couple $1 million a pop every time we do one of these with a developer. And they certainly are a big benefit to the environment and reducing the sediment that goes down to the Chesapeake Bay. So seeing no discussions, and again, I am checking the chat. So if anybody has any comments and they would like to submit as the discussion is going along, I will read it if you send something via chat to the board here. The motion is to authorize the board chairman or vice chairman to sign a letter of intent for the Swore Run Floodplain Restoration Project's application for a Chesapeake Bay Environmental Restoration and Protection Program known as a Section 510 program. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Weaver. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay, second for Mr. LaFever. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth. Mr. Wigglesworth is muted.
Yeah, he did mute on quickly.
There
Let
you
me try again. Okay.
Mr. Wigglesworth,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye. So ayes have it, 5-0. Next up, we have the police contract extension agreement. Ms. Schweitzer, if you'd like to start off the discussion with that.
So our police contract expires December of 2021. We've been in discussions with the union and have struck a deal and an arrangement that we could extend the contract by 2 years. So you have that document before you. It's already been signed and approved by the union. And this would extend the contract to December 31 of 2023. All content of the contract stays the same. 3% increases for those additional 2 years.
Okay. Does anybody from the Public Safety Committee want to speak up at this point?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Wigglesworth.
I think it's in our best interests, in our mutual interests with the union to extend for 2 years. It will save us on fees and time with the negotiations. So all in all, I thought our last contract was a fair contract. And moving forward, I think it's in our best interest to agree to the extension.
Okay. Mr. LaFever, do you have anything you want to add with the Public Safety Working Group?
Well, my only disappointment is we had very nice negotiations with the police for the contract that we have, and so we won't be able to do that. But I do definitely support this in the interest of the township and the police union. Thank you. Thank you for those that expedited this decision.
I think from the big public safety perspective, considering that we're going to be jumping into creating a fire commission, that by extending this and not having to go through a long labor negotiation right now will give us the ample time that we're going to need for getting the fire commission off the ground. So any other discussion of the board? Okay, I see none, and I see no public comment from the chat. So with that, I will entertain a motion to authorize the board chairman or vice chairman to sign the police contract extension agreement as presented.
So moved.
A motion for Mr. Wigglesworth and a second for Mr. LaFever. Mrs. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye. So the ayes have it, 5-0. Okay, next up, this is going to have a little bit of discussion. This is the county's joint petition to stay the real estate tax upset sale, and it requires the township to join her to the petition. That's a big mouthful of information to basically say extending the time in which residents can submit their property tax for both the county and the local level, it's not school district, and not pay penalty if they miss the June 30th deadline. So Ms. Schweitzer, do you want to kind of give a little background as to how we got here, our solicitor review? And I will say for the record, we're probably the first municipality that will be taking action on this. I'm not aware of any others that have at this point. So Ms. Schweitzer.
There are several others, and
Okay.
unfortunately, they have varying deadline dates, either December 30 or 31 or November 30. Our resolution is set up for November 30th. We've had conversations with our treasurer. We also had our conversation with the attorney, and she had a conversation with the county attorney. And that's why you see the very second to last paragraph in there in bold. That was provided by Christine Hauser from the county. And it essentially does push the 10% penalty date from June 30 to November 30. And it is contingent on all municipalities in Lancaster County doing this, which is going to be a feat in itself. But we have to start somewhere.
So just a little more background, just to go over some of the concerns that people had that I don't think fully understood what is being proposed here and what its implications is. This is not waiving the property tax requirement. The property tax still has to be paid. It's just not incurring a penalty if a resident or a business owner or a property owner needs additional time in order to make payment. We had budgeted approximately $4,500 total in our budget, which represents 0.15% of our total property tax collected, with penalties and fees for people that did not pay by June 30th. That is really all that is at stake at this point. If a person did not take advantage of the discount period, they're already in many ways financially distressed. So us granting this relief will help a little bit, but the grand scheme of things, it's not a big help since it's not the big property tax, that's a school tax. But it really doesn't hurt our budget in any way. So it does send a positive message to those that have just been recently laid off. They have just a couple more months to collect the monies that they're going to need to pay property taxes. But realistically, the majority of the residents, over 90%, pay during the discount period, even during bad times, because the banks, unless you happen to be a retiree, the banks collect an escrow. The escrow automatically pays the property tax. So really, this is not going to have a big hit on our finances. In fact, this has no hit in the grand scheme of things. And our next agenda item, we're going to talk about the areas where we are going to take hits financially as a township with revenue coming in, but this is not one of them. So there has been some misperceptions that went out when the county treasurer first put this out, that this was a tax elimination. That's not what's being proposed. It's just not adding salt to a wound to somebody who's been laid off recently and struggling to pay, that they now have to pay a penalty on top of it all if they need a couple extra months to put the money together in order to pay property tax. So that's really what the intent of it is. I think it's a very good thing to do. I think it's a good gesture, and it really has no impact to our bottom line.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
question. I noticed that our resolution does not really dovetail with the two options provided by the county treasurer. Was there some reason for that?
I'll leave that to Ms. Schweitzer while I pull it up myself.
It does. She recommended either December 31 or November 30.
She recommended that was the option 2. I was more interested in option 1 that extended the discount period until August the 1st and then implement the base period from September 1st until December 31st, which is a little more generous, I think, than perhaps ours was. And then I guess my next question would be, will all the municipalities within the county, will we all be doing the same thing?
At this point, there are numerous municipalities that have adopted this, and they're all over the board. So how that's going to be viewed, I'm not sure. I don't think Ms. Martin knows either, because some have dates of November 30, some have dates of December 31.
Right.
That obviously will be resolved by the county solicitor. I think if all the municipalities do sign on and they have 2 different dates, I think there'll be one of 2 things that will happen. Either more than likely the November 30th deadline will be the prevailing date. That's the one the county's actually promoting at this point. And if the county were to adopt a joiner resolution on their end, which would basically solidify what all the municipalities did, that's the more conservative one of the 2 options, because it would by default bring in the ones that are also December 30th. But if that's not the way it's interpreted, I would imagine that some of the municipalities a couple months from now would need to redo the resolutions. I would be encouraging, should we take a positive vote tonight on this, I would be encouraging Ms. Schweitzer to send out our resolution and our action to the countywide, to the managers group, so that others can consider this resolution.
Well, I guess I would say I personally would be in favor of supporting the option 1 recommended by the county treasurer. I would assume that or option 2 would be the preferred options, and it would be easier for us to dovetail maybe.
Are you referring to her
Right.
letter that she sent?
Yeah, page 3 of her letter.
That letter came very early on. The email that's also attached to your packet is the more recent one, where she explains both the property tax relief and the postponing the upset sale. So I think she may have backed down on those dates.
I got one email, March 25th, 2020. Is that?
Yeah, the one that, the most recent one is dated 4/6/2020. It's titled "Good Afternoon, Municipal Managers." She explains further in greater detail her position on these 2 things, and explains further the impact or lack of impact doing this has on most municipalities. There you go, Scott.
Yeah, what can you see that? I didn't know if I was still sharing screen.
Yes.
So you can see what I put up there? Okay. So this is what Ms. Martin sent out to the municipalities as an update. Because like I said, there was some confusion at first with what she had presented and some misperceptions that occurred that it was just going to be tax abatement. And so what she did is she sent this out, and then this is what the resolution that the county solicitor and our solicitor came up with that we are considering tonight.
So will not be extending the discount period.
No, that was, there's some complexity that goes along with that, considering that a lot of the discount period is already come and gone. So really what I was focusing on is not, right now the penalty period has not started yet. And so it's a lot easier right now to make changes for something that's not occurred yet than for something that's already past tense.
Okay, I didn't see that email from her. Okay, we're on the same page then. I just wanted to be on the same page with the treasurer.
Yep, we are.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so, and like I said, we typically, according to Mr. Robinson, we typically get about 90% of our property tax in during the discount period. We have just, when we went through the downturn 10 years ago, realistically, we didn't really see too much of a drop in our property tax. We had more delinquents that went at the end of the year that were unable to pay tax at all. And that really, the relief that we're proposing does not help somebody that simply does not have the money to pay property tax at all. But we really don't see too much of a drop off. Like I said, this is more of in many ways, a feel-good gesture for those that are struggling, the few that are struggling that pay the property tax directly, don't have a bank that they're doing escrow with right now. That's the group that we're helping.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you noticed, there is a chat question from the audience.
Okay. The Mr. Detweiler at 870, expanding the real estate tax base period. That is what Mr. Detweiler, I'll read your question. This is Mr. Scott Detweiler, 870 Church Street, Landisville. Was an agenda item missed, expanding the real estate base period. That's what we were talking about when we talk about the penalty period. The base period goes to June 30th. And basically extending the base period will now go, what we're proposing with our resolution, to November 30th, where a person has the ability to pay their full property tax amount without paying any additional penalty. Right now, if they paid after June 30th, there would be a penalty that would be imposed in addition to the property tax that was due. And thank you, Mr. Lefevre, for pointing that out. I got to look at that chat a little bit more frequently.
We'll help you.
I got a good team around me.
There's another chat up, I see.
Yeah, it's basically, it was a thank you for the response. So
There we
we're
go.
good with that one.
I had to move my screen pop-ups or whatever they're called.
Okay, any more discussion at this point? Like I said, there's some, Ms. Schweitzer has correctly pointed out that some municipalities are adopting the original date, which was December 31st. I got a feeling the prevailing will of the municipalities will be November 30th, just because that allows all the property tax to be collected and accounted for within the tax year, versus going into the following year, which does cause some accounting issues for the municipalities. So to avoid accounting issues, November 30th really is a realistic deadline for this relief to be granted.
I'll concur with Mr. Bennett that we would go with the county's recommendation.
Okay. Now let me put a motion together for everybody, and then hold on a second here. What is that? Okay, the motion would be, this would be resolution 2020-19. The motion is to adopt resolution 2020-19, extending the period in which real estate tax may be paid at the base rate by adopting a penalty rate of 0% through November 30th, 2020. So I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Lefevre. Ms. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth? Mr. Russell?
Aye. So the ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, everybody. The next part is an impact analysis. So what is the impact going to be on our revenue and our expenses for 2020? We talked at the last meeting that we were going to start needing to do some analysis and some forward planning so that we don't get caught flat-footed in the months ahead. There was a finance and admin working group meeting this morning Mr. Robinson and Ms. Schweitzer presented some preliminary numbers. I'll give a quick recap, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Robinson, who's got a little bit more that he wants to put out. But the big picture is,
Mr. Russell, if I could
yes,
interrupt.
ma'am.
You missed one on the agenda. It would be the county petition to stay the real estate tax upset sale. That's the second
Okay.
part of the county treasurer's request.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So let me take a step back on that one. So the joint petition with the county. So what we had talked about is when we adopt this resolution, all the municipalities have to adopt a similar resolution. And then what the county treasurer has to do is she has to go and petition the Board of Commissioners. And so the Board of Commissioners are the last body that takes action after all the municipalities take action. So it has to be 100% unanimous on the municipality side, and then the Board of Commissioners actually able to legally take action on their end. So the second step of our process after adopting Resolution 2020-19 is a motion to offer East Hempfield Township support to the Lancaster County Treasurer, Ms. Amber Martin, for filing the joint petition to stay the 2020 upset tax sale pursuant to PA Code 72, Section 5860-601C. So I will entertain a motion to adopt this offer of support.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second for Mr. Weaver. Ms. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye. So the ayes have it. 5-0. Okay, now back on to our next agenda item, which was talking about the impact analysis. 10 years ago, when we went through our last bad financial time in 2010, which was when the 2009 financial crisis finally started catching up with municipalities financially, we were in a different state than we are today. The township's budget and funds were not necessarily in good shape at that point. And there was a lot of hard and difficult decisions that were needed to be made at that time to make the numbers work financially for both the township and for the residents. Moving forward, we adopted policies, we built up the capital reserve, and we're in a much better position this time around for a downturn than we were 10 years ago. That being said, this more than likely has the potential of being a lot worse than what occurred in 2010. And so what we are starting to do is to take a hard look at our revenue and what's going to be coming in, and our expenses, which have also gone up as we've been dealing with less than efficient work and some of the issues and impacts of this statewide closure that we're dealing with, to include our golf course closing and lost revenue that goes along with that. Something we did not have to deal with in 2010 during the mortgage crisis. So we have looked at things. This is going to be an ongoing discussion. Probably every meeting we're going to have this as an agenda item where we're going to be giving discussions and talks and updates on. But we have started the process. Mr. Robinson, if you would like to kind of give your recap on the state of affairs for the township.
If it's okay, I'll just jump in there.
Okay, Ms. Schweitzer then.
All right. What Joe has gotten back from the collector for the earned income tax and the local services tax, he's basically got an estimate from them. And he is anticipating at this point in time that we're going to see a shortfall of revenues of $562,000. We then looked at what we can do to offset that cost. And we actually found $576,000 without too much trouble. That includes the opening fund balance going into 2020 is actually $100,000 more than we anticipated. We also have some savings that we can realize during our vehicle purchase with the new fleet program of $165,000. We have savings on the very light winter we had, so therefore not as much salt is used. That's another savings of $140,000. Savings of not filling the 34th officer in 2020. That's $96,000, and then various other smaller line items, which total $75,000. So all total, that adds up to $576,000, which covers the $562,000 projected deficit. We also look further, and if we need to, we have $150,000 that we have yet to give to the police pension fund. This is our option. This is our choosing. We've done this for several years. We're going to basically hold off and wait till the end of the year and see what has materialized for that $150,000. Also, the road maintenance program, that's a new budget line item. It's $200,000. It was basically to do road maintenance before the roads actually need to be totally redone. Again, that can be postponed until next year. So that's another $350,000. I did want to point out that the budget, anticipated year-end budget balance is going to be 2.7 million. So even if we couldn't find anything, taking off $562,000 off of that 2.7 is not a huge number. It is a hit. But it is manageable with the items that we've found thus far. So as Mr. Russell indicated, we're going to continue looking at that, and the collector will continue to give us updates and revenue projections as we move forward. I believe we are expecting a major deposit in May from that revenue source, Joe.
Yeah, the earned income tax, what we received in the first quarter of 2020 represented the employer tax returns from the fourth quarter of 2019. So then what you receive in the second quarter of this year will actually represent the employer returns for the first quarter of 2020. So we're really not going to see this adjustment really hit us until July, August, and September, when in our third quarter, we'll receive the second quarter employer returns. And with all the furloughs and layoffs and so forth, that's where we're going to see it hit the budget. But we're not going to really see those numbers until the beginning of July and into August. If that makes sense.
We cautiously have to move through the year and watch her spending, watch her revenues in the general fund.
And the other thing is, as there's a lead lag, as Mr. Robinson just talked about. So we're also going to have to be looking at how this translates to our 2021 budget too.
Right.
So when we start looking at this, this really is a 2-year budgeting drill that we go through. We're going to go through what the in many ways the economic carnage that's going to occur in 2020, but it is going to then carry on into 2021. So even if things do have an uptick, at some point, there is always an uptick. So at some point we'll hit bottom and then it'll start turning back around. We, from a tax revenue perspective, are on the lag side of things. And so both property as well as more significantly more is earned income tax is going to be on the back side of that. So we'll know September will be representing the spring, but the fall of this year coming up is going to be the beginning of next year's impacts. So it's going to be looking at budgeting, which we have been doing for a number of years now, where we look at multi-year budgeting, but we're really going to have to put the screws to the budget for the next 2 years.
And keep in mind, the earned income tax was budgeted at 4.5 million. That represents 36% of our general fund budget. It's the biggest revenue item we have. And unfortunately, that's the one we're looking at.
So if there's no other questions for the general fund, I'd like to go to the golf fund then.
Aye.
Ms. Switzer. Okay.
Mr.
Mr. Wigglesworth.
Chairman, do we have something we can follow along with in our packet? Is your, or after this meeting, can we get a highlight or a summary of what you just discussed?
Yeah, we will be able to provide that to you in a not too distant future date.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
And we will be discussing this with actually putting numbers up. The meeting just happened today. So I just felt it would be timely to have a discussion at this point and not wait for a memo or something else to go out.
So then we also looked at the golf course. That's a little bit of a different animal. We closed the golf course on March 19th, and we're hoping that we can get it back open May 15th. So that's what these numbers are based on. That's going to show a loss of $151,000 in revenue. So of course, we, like the general fund, we want to look to see how we can manage that $151,000 loss. The opening fund balance was higher than planned by $35,000. The January-March revenues were higher than anticipated from 19. That's an additional $16,000. And we're estimating that having it closed, there is some savings. That's a $42,000 savings. That only adds up to $93,000. So we still have a shortfall of $58,000 in that fund. The anticipated ending balance at this year end is $68,000. That's higher than normal. We were trying to increase that budget balance for anticipated expenditures. So we could take that $68,000. That would leave us with an ending balance of 10. Not as rosy or doable as the general fund, but still feasible.
Okay.
I would just offer that once we get governmental, which I believe would be state of Pennsylvania in our situation, approval to have golf courses open under CDC guidelines, I would ask that our staff be prepared to manipulate or implement whatever we can do to get going again. I'm
Yeah.
sure they will.
So that was also the last part of our discussion is I strongly anticipate, based off our discussion with our local legislators, what's being discussed at the federal level, that there's going to be some sort of phased in back to work that's going to be occurring. What we call another new normal at some point, which will be a hybrid of what we have right now, which is pretty much closing most things, but not necessarily a complete full back to normal type work. The township staff and Ms. Schweitzer has been taking the lead at starting to put together their plan for what this new normal is going to look like and how the township's going to operate. And I'll let Ms. Schweitzer talk about that a little bit. That was, like I said, the last part of our discussion.
Yeah, we really haven't gotten anything concrete. We are just starting to gear up. I'm hearing a lot of things from the other managers that, yeah, this is the time. When are you coming back? How are you going to do that? What's that look like? We haven't developed that yet. I need to have a conversation with Diane Garber, make sure we have the proper protocols in place. We have loosened up the Public Works Department and have encouraged them to start doing things maybe in pairs or threes, as long as they can distance themselves properly. So we're starting. We just don't have a whole lot to report yet.
Any more discussion? This is really just to present information, and like I said, the meeting just occurred today, so there's going to be a lot of talk about this in the weeks ahead. Hopefully, our next meeting we're going to be talking about how we're going to start implementing whatever phase work plan is going to be back to work. So I don't think we as a community and we as a country can go much longer not working. So I'm anticipating that regardless of what the status of the virus is, one of the new normals might be, we might be practicing social distancing and wearing masks at work, but we're going to be back at work.
You don't like retirement?
It's a great time to be retired. That's my father-in-law. So he's living with us. He's enjoying the dream right now.
Yeah, It ain't what it appears.
He'll say the same thing. So, okay, so with that, we'll move on. And that was, like I said, just there was no action. It was just a discussion at this point. Under old business, we have 2 items. We have the Emergency Service Coordinator Agreement, and then we also have the Hempfield Area Fire Service Commission Agreement. Both of them are between the township and East Petersburg. So Ms. Schweitzer, I'll turn it over to you first, and Ms. Garber.
Mr. Chairman, can I back you up one more? To
Yes,
the
ma'am.
designation of signatory.
Okay, thank you. We have a PEMA designation of signatory for the COVID-19 PEMA submission for funding, Resolution 2020-20. So I'll let Ms. Schweitzer, if you want to explain that for a moment.
And this is simply the form that gets filled out. We've filled this out for flooding already. It's just the form that gets filled out. It designates Diane Garber as the signatory. She will be doing the submissions. She will be getting the emails and the information. And this document just simply states that. And it has to be done by resolution.
And as we discussed, Ms. Schweitzer, all 5 board members need to sign this document.
Correct. So we're going to be passing it
What
around.
what we'll do is in a rather unique social distancing kind of way. The document will be forwarded to me. I'll sign it, and then I will scan it, my signature of the form, to the next supervisor. And we'll go all the way down to Mr. Lefevre, who I'm understanding might not be able to do scanning. If he can scan it, then he'll scan it back to the township. If not, then he'll have the dubious duty of driving in Ms. Schweitzer and dropping the signed form off.
I am able to scan.
You are able to scan.
I can scan.
Okay, well then we are set. So I will initiate the process tomorrow. We will be scanning things at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are we able to, or for Cindy, are we able to digitally sign the PDF instead of having to scan it?
I would imagine this day and age, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, that's what I would suggest, but whatever works.
That would require the information to be on the document, though. I don't know what you think about that, Diane. It might be easier just for this round to just.
Sign it and scan it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the easier thing right now is just quick sign and scan. I mean,
Okay.
in an ideal world, that won't take too long. It's just a document. It's not a multi-page, many-page book
All right,
document.
that works.
That's correct.
Okay,
The DAP
thanks.
one is not set up for digital signature. The other forms that we have to submit are set up for digital signature, but the DAP one form, the resolution, actually needs physical signatures.
Very good.
Okay, so with that, I got weird messages popping up on my computer. I'll entertain a motion to designate Ms. Diane Garber as a signatory agent on submission to PEMA regarding the COVID-19 under this Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act as discussed. So I entertain that motion.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Lefevre. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wigglesworth. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett, he's talking.
Sorry, bye.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth,
Aye.
and Mr. Russell.
Aye. Okay, so the ayes have it, 5-0. Okay, so now we'll move again on to old business. This is twice now I've gotten out of the order of the agenda. As we were talking about, we have the Emergency Service Coordinator Agreement between the East Hempfield Township, East Petersburg Borough, and the Hempfield Area Fire Service Commission Agreement between East Hempfield Township and East Pete Borough. So Ms. Schweitzer, if you want to start the discussion here.
I am very happy to present these 2 agreements to you. The Emergency Management Coordinator Agreement has been floating around for over a year, and the Fire Services Agreement has been a couple of months. So I have been in contact with the manager from East Pete Borough. She is comfortable. I believe her committee is comfortable with the wording in these 2 documents. They are planning on putting this on their agenda for next Thursday for their work session to have action. So there's no action for tonight, but this is the first time that you have seen the modified agreements. And I just wanted to get your feel, if there's any concerns you have on these agreements. I can do the highlights. There was some verbiage in item number 1 of the Emergency Management Coordinators Agreement. That's been removed and it's been replaced by meet and discuss meetings, which seems to address their concern and provides a forum to address any issues that come up in this agreement. The other one is they were, in terms of the payment, number 4, the East Pete Borough desires to base their payment on budget numbers, not actual. So that's what this is reflective of, is it's actually budgeted numbers. I did explain to her that our budget is typically higher. And they said they would prefer to have a known amount that they are required to pay. So that was the other significant change to this agreement. I don't know if there's any
Okay,
questions on that.
I'll turn it over to our public safety working group, since this has been a labor of love at this point. So do either one of you have any comments about the agreement?
Just appreciate Mrs. Schweitzer's efforts working with the borough manager to get to this point. Thank you.
I would concur. I think specifically with the fire commission, I feel like the language in that one, we went back and forth a few times, but I think we've come to an agreement that's fair. So I'm fine with both.
And I think there's a good timing on this right now. I think more than ever, everybody truly appreciates the work that Mrs. Garber does. So I hate to say sometimes it takes a crisis, but here we are. So we got the agreements. And Ms. Schweitzer, you said there's no action for us to take tonight, so I guess we will be taking action in 2 weeks on these
That's
agreements
correct.
at that point. So I would like to compliment everybody on the job that we've gotten to get to this point. I know our Fire Services Commission, ideally, we would have already been kind of starting it. The pandemic's kind of put that on brakes for right now. But I look forward to seeing sometime summer, hopefully no later than early fall, we get that ball rolling and get the meetings going and start implementing the plan that we had for fire services and emergency services in the township. And that commission was one of the first things we had to do to implement the plan, the study. Ms. Garber, I don't know if you have anything else you would like to add on those 2 agreements?
I do. I'd just like to say that regardless of the stall on the agreements for the Emergency Services Commission, our fire companies have continued, especially through this crisis process, to work together to establish standards on their responses and things. So it is great to see that regardless of the fact that we haven't been able to physically establish the commission and move forward with that, the fire companies continue to work together and move forward with combined efforts and standardization. So I would give kudos to our fire departments, their chiefs and their administrative officers for continuing that process without regard for our slowed paperwork process.
Okay, I'm seeing nothing in our chat. Is there any more board discussion at this point? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to new business, and we have our MS4 quarterly report. Nothing like that in the middle of a crisis. Let's talk about some MS4 stuff. Ms. Schweitzer or Mr. Beck? Who's going to run with that?
I believe Mr. Beck.
Okay, Mr. Beck, you're it.
Mr. Beck, you're muted.
I don't see Mr. Beck listed as a participant any longer.
No, he's there. And he's now unmuted, so Mr. Beck, it's all you.
The report covers January through April 2020. And it was sent to Cindy and I from Charity Burkhart from Land Studies. And they did complete a floodplain restoration article for the newsletter that went out to all the residents. They were covering complaint tracking. Specifically, they identified an illicit discharge or possible illicit discharge at Barcrest Apartments while they were doing their dry weather outfall screenings. And segueing into that, they completed the Group 3 outfall screenings. They had 37 outfalls inspected, and they identified 14 new outfalls. 7 of those were wet and dry weather. One of them was classified as an illicit discharge, as I said, at Barcrest Apartments. All the other remaining outfalls were determined to be wet weather flows from groundwater. The pathogen plan document draft was completed in February. EMP inspections continued for Group 3. They're 25% complete. Construction site inventory continuing to be updated. Map updates will continue. Municipal rainfall event inspections, they continue to do those. Public Works training material provided for January, February, March, and April. And Charity sent that, and I'm happy to say I can't talk about him enough, and he has been a tremendous asset to not only the Development Services Department, but the township as a whole. Nate Sturgis has taken the reins and is handling the trainings with Public Works, and I envision he will be handling all trainings with all township staff in the near future and moving forward. Standard operating procedures were developed for the rest of 2020 and some of 2021. And for the upcoming quarters, they will begin the annual report. They have MCM2 activities, which is Water Week activities, and pending the outcome of COVID-19 and how this affects everything else, it most likely will affect Water Week, which is presumed to be in the first week of June. They have 24 dry weather inspections for Group 1 that they will be conducting in the second quarter. And they will continue to do BMP inspections. And if there's any questions, if I don't know the answer, I will be happy to get that for the board members or any other interested person, and I will report back at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beck. Any questions for the board at this point? State might shut down, but we still do MS4. So with that, board group reports, I'll just start off with that we did have an admin and finance meeting today, and we covered everything that we discussed in that meeting. Are there any other board meetings at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Traffic Commission reports. Very easy report, meeting was canceled. Next, we'll move on to the manager's report, Mrs. Schweitzer.
So you received my manager's report. I don't know if you want me to read it because of the public, or maybe you can put it up on your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it up on the screen here.
It's kind of a slow time period. A lot of our projects are on hold because of the COVID crisis. We did have a major breakthrough at Old Orrstown Road Bridge. They did get an Army Corps permit. Not the only one they need, but they are working towards it. I am still waiting for feedback from Penn State regarding our negotiations. We have not heard anything.
And just for the record, Penn State does have a waiver to work right now.
Yes.
So they are moving dirt, as is Mrs. Schweitzer's report.
The village zoning district and the wireless facilities ordinance, those are moving forward, but slower than we had anticipated.
Mr. Chairman, maybe you recognize.
Yes, Mr. Wigglesworth.
Can we, Mrs. Schweitzer, can we add to, I know we put in for grant to cover finishing out the walking trail and adding another entrance to the park. Can we just get a regular update on that? Can we have it added to the manager's report in the future?
Finishing out the trail is part of the grant, you're correct. You want me to add it? I'm not quite sure what you want me to add.
Just, I would like to be updated monthly, or too much to expect action on that in that time. Some type of regular updating. During this process, I just feel like what we accomplished with the trail has been very much well received and appreciated during this particular crisis. And I believe that the trail has brought great value to the township, and would love to see it finalized and completed and have some mechanism to see that that does happen and we don't forget about it.
Okay.
Is the trail not a job, Mrs. Schweitzer, that Public Works might be able to work on and still stay within the guidelines?
It requires a specific paving piece that Mr. Madonna doesn't have in his department. So we actually contract that out. Now they do the manual work, the laying of the stone, digging of the ditch. Harry, correct me if I'm wrong where I'm going here. That last part of that trail is actually part of the grant submission to DCNR. So that may not occur until next year.
Yeah, that's correct. It is a portion of the section of up near the pavilion, I guess, and really without knowing if we're getting, the grant for the driveway and that sort of thing, it's really hard to make connections to something that's not there. So at this point, that portion would be, we would probably have to hold off until the parking lot and the driveways are completed as a part of that project. The one thing I would like to do, and there is money in the budget this year, we are still having issues with some washouts in the stone portion that's at the southeastern part of the trail right now, and some of the stone is still washing down into the swale with these heavier storms. So one of the things that I was going to bring up at our next group meeting was to actually pave some of that trail this coming year. We have gotten quite a number of positive reactions towards the portion that was actually paved, and quite a few residents have asked why the remainder of the trails haven't been paved like that. So that will be, I guess, brought up at a later date. And Mrs. Schweitzer is correct that we do rent a paver, from a company to come in and actually do that. We do not own, a trail paver. So I'm not sure if that group is actually even working at this point, but that's something we can investigate here with our one group meeting that we're going to have shortly.
Okay, any other discussions for the manager's report?
Can I just piggyback off of Perry's comments?
Yes, Mr. Wigglesworth.
Is it possible, Perry, on the northwest corner there where it's gravel and then it seems to go up the hill and then it sort of stops? Is there anything that we could do to make a temporary connection that would not cost a lot of money and provide the full loop?
Not sure where you were talking about.
The maintenance shed.
Go ahead.
by the maintenance shed there, and it runs along and comes out to the northwest corner of the property. Then it goes south and it comes up to Naomi, and it sort of ends there at Naomi.
Correct. Where we, I guess where we would be going on the other side of that we would be connecting to the part that will eventually become the driveway. So we're not sure where that's going to actually be at this point. It's kind of hard to guess at that, and I'd hate to put something in and then have to rip it out. That basic connection is up there, I guess, is for people coming in from Naomi, and I know it is a short walk through the grass to get down to the, the driveway there at the pavilion, but again, it's something that we could look at and see what we could do at this point.
We could probably make that connection just so that they're off the grass. Just put it in gravel, dig it and put it in gravel.
That's what I was thinking. It would just be nice to have the full loop where someone can jog the full loop without going into the grass and then unsteady.
We'll look at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Russell.
Any other comments for, yes, yes, Chief.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've lived in the township for about 50 years and close by this park for the last 20. And that's probably the single best money that's been spent on recreation in the township. So I use it almost every day, and I probably pass at least 10 people just on the loop through there. Many more than that now that they have no place to go. So that section that Mr. Wigglesworth talked about, that does kind of dead end you, especially if the ground is wet early in the morning or in the evening, because you have to stop and either turn around and go the other way or walk through the grass. And especially for the women that are pushing baby carriages and the kids that are riding scooters and rollerblading, they have to stop at that point and go the other way.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, so seeing no more comments for the manager's report, and again, seeing nothing in the group chat, we will go to public comment. Ms. Schweitzer, did we get any emails or public comment ahead of the meeting?
We did not.
Okay, I am looking at the chat. I will give a minute or two if anybody wants to throw a question or two our way related to the chat. So we'll wait a minute or two to give people a chance.
Mr. Chairman, historic perspective to share where others have been before. On this day, 155 years ago, President Lincoln died from the assassination's bullet. 108 years ago today, the Titanic sank. So we don't have such awful issues maybe every day ourselves.
I'm nervous to go outside though after reading those two things. A meteor strike or something.
It could happen.
Okay, I am seeing nothing on the group chat. So with that, we are going to be adjourning our meeting. We are going to be going into executive session, which is going to be the first time we've ever done that on Zoom. It's a private executive session. We're going to be discussing personal matters, and we are not going to return. So with that, it is now 8:24 p.m. and I'm formally adjourning this meeting by hitting the X button on my screen.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
before you do that, just a confirmation from the board members that they received the email with the ID meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we do have that. Okay, so we will exit out. As I said, we're going to go into an executive session to discuss personal matters, and we will not return. Thank you, everybody, for a successful Zoom meeting tonight, and I'll see you at our next Zoom meeting in a few minutes. Thank you.